today at Lindholme Lakes. We're on Beeches Lake today. It's been fantastic, to be fair. What we're going to do is we're going to do two different approaches on a long pole. What basically just covers your options. I like to give myself a chance every time in a match. So for instance, if I just went with one bait, it's too selective. So by that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fish maggots and ground bait on a long pole, which targets everything, and then I'm going to fish pellets on a long pole too. Two different lines, both at 13 metres, but I feel that if I just do one or the other, I'm restricting what I'm going to catch. So my maggots and ground bait line, I'm going to be catching a bit of a mixture of everything. You're going to be catching the new eye, there's some stock eye that they've just put in, skimmers, roach with the odd F1 or carp over it. Pellets, you're probably going to catch F1s and carp, maybe the odd skimmer. But as I say, I'm restricting what I do if I just do one of them. So I'm doing them both on a long pole. To be fair, it's been very, very good today. It's been great that I can demonstrate two different things, two different approaches. The way that I do things like this as well is great if you're not sure what you're going to catch. If you go to a venue for the first time, the way I'm fishing today is one of them ways where you can find out what's in your peg. I'll talk to you about rigs. The first rig I've got is a pellet rig. Now it's bog standard pellet rig. The difference between a pellet rig and a maggot rig is they're a lot more positive on a pellet rig. End of the day, you want to put your bait in, you want to tap your bait in a tiny little area, and you want to put your rig straight over the top, nail it down. This is why this rig, I'll show you why I do that and how I do that. The first thing is my float. So I like to have a nice elongated body, so it's more of an oval style float, but I always have a wire stem. When I'm pellet fishing, I always have a wire stem. The reason is just stability. There's no other reason for it. I need that stability because when I put my bait in, I want that pellet to go over the top. I don't want it to move. In essence, I'm making a method feeder effect on the bottom. So all my rigs are tied to 016 main line. They're all tied to 016 main line. Again, I think I've gone on for this before. It just makes them versatile. It means that I can go in my box. I can use them all year round, really, unless I'm proper carping. Shotting for this, dead simple. It's just a strung bull, but as you'll notice, it's quite an aggressive rig. So when people talk about strung bolts, they might sometimes mean over the last 12, 14 inches of a rig. I actually do mine over probably 4 inch, which again, it looks really aggressive, but it works because what you're doing is, because you've got that lead down your line and you're putting your pellet up bait over your micros, you don't want that bait to move. I've found that, I've experimented before, I found if I just have a block, then sometimes what can happen is you can miss bites, and what can happen is the fish will pick it up and reject it because they're feeling the whole block at the same time. I know it's quite a tight strung bulk, but what they actually do is when they suck it in, they feel one shot at a time. And that makes it so that you get a positive indication. In essence, because the big droppers on this, they're all number 9s, it makes it so they can't reject the bait really easily. Down to a 4-inch hook length of 010 and an 18 hook. Elastic wise, it's the orange micro bore. For me, this is one of the most versatile elastics. If I'm unsure what I'm going to catch, I'll always reach for this elastic. It's a great rated at 5 to 7. And again, today I've caught carp to £8, and I've caught small eyed as well. This is so versatile. Down to a little pot. Obviously I like to keep my pots quite right at the end of my pole tip. Again, it's accuracy. Accuracy is so important when you're fishing pellets. Put your little pile in, put your rig over the top, and you don't want it to move. Dead simple. On the other hand, my ground bait and a maggot approach, this is a little bit different, to be fair. You can get away. You have to fish lighter rigs. I've got 2 rigs set up for this. Again, made on 016 mainline. All of them are made on 016 mainline, again, just to make the rigs versatile. And I've got two different rigs. I've got one with a bulk and 2 droppers, but I have the bulk fairly high. I have my bulk fairly high. Then what I do is my first dropper is actually not a dropper, it's just a kicker, what I call a kicker. And what that does is it sits an inch below my bulk, and all that does is kicks it away from the bulk to stop the rig from tangling. That's all that does. And then I've got 2 droppers down my line. A little bit different to my pellet rig. I want this to come down a little bit better, a bit slower. So what I've got is I've got a 6-inch hook length, again of 010 to an 18 hook, but again I've got dropper shot and the small dropper shot. In this case they're 11s. My float is a 0.3. We're fishing about 5 foot of water here. my float on my pellet rig were a 0.4. On this is at 0.3, so I've got a bulk and droppers. Again, everything else, same elastic, same everything. And just one more rig for this. Again, this is for me maggot line, and this is what I call an on the drop rig. It's probably a traditional on the drop rig where you've got shot equally spaced down the line, especially when you're firing maggots in over the top of your ground bait. Sometimes you get a lot of fish coming shallow. Now this rig will cover all that, so it'll let you know if you can catch on the drop or if you're going to catch shallow, etc. So by firing your maggots in, laying this rig in, this rig will tell you where the fish are. So I always set one of these up. So I've got 2 stars. I've got a positive bolt down rig, and I've got a strung out rig. So I think that covers both my options. Right, I'll just talk to you about feeding, especially how I start my peg. Now what I do is, sometimes when you come to a venue and you're a bit alien to it, you're a bit unsure, so the best thing to do is just be a little bit negative. So what I do is I've got a ground bait mix and some maggots, and what I do is 9 times out of 10, if I'm under 6 foot now, I always feed my ground bait loose. Unless there's a silly undertow or anything like that, I always feed it loose, and by that I mean I pick the ground bait up, I give it one light squeeze. So in essence, all it's doing is breaking the surface. You give it a light squeeze, and I like to feed that separate to my maggots, unless you're feeding dead maggots. Now you can put the dead maggots in the ground bait, mix that together and do it like that. But what I generally do when it's like this is I'll feed my ball and I'll feed live maggots as well. So what I'll do is I'll drop my live maggots in the bottom of the pot, I'll put my little ball over the top, and then they'll sink down, and what that happens is the ground bait covers a better area, and then what happens then is the maggots in essence go over top of the area then. And then what I do then is I'll loose feed through the day and then play it by ear with me fish meal. So for instance, what I've found today is when I loose feed, I'm catching a lot of hide, and then every so often your peg will go quiet and you'll catch an F1 or you'll catch a carp, which is what I've done today. And then I feel that there's no fish meal left in my peg. I feel that the carp have been in, they've hoovered that up. Because it's not in the ball, because it's loose on the bottom, it's very easy to be disturbed, and it's very easy to come off the bottom and just disappear, or the fish eat it. So what I do then is I top up. A lot of people top up with little balls. Now again, sometimes what can happen is, especially on like where we are today, we're on Beeches Lake today at Lindholme, and it's quite silty on the bottom. Now I found if you top up with a little ball, which you can do at some venues, like you might put a little ball in like that with a few dead maggots in, but what I've found is that can disappear. I've found that can disappear within the bottom because it's so soft. And then what you might find is you might feel like you haven't really fed. So what I do to top up, pretty similar to what I've done at the start. So I get my ground bait and I give it one little light squeeze. So in essence, you could literally break it up. But what you're doing is you're just going one, and then what's happening then is it'll do 2 things. One, it'll rest on top of the silt. So it's literally have already broke down before it hits the bottom. So it'll rest on top of the silt. And 2, as it's going down, it creates a cloud. It don't go down in one ball. It goes down and creates a cloud which brings the fish back into your peg. So in essence, what I'm doing is I'm loose feeding the bait. That'll keep things like hide, roach, skimmers, them sort of things occupied. But once an F1 comes into your peg, I like to think that I've got a little bit of ground bait on the bottom, just keeps them fish rooting. Now with pellet line, that is really easy to start off. Again, it's not very often I'll big pot. It's not very often I'll use my big pot after I've put my ground bait in, especially my pellet line. So all I'll do is I get my little pot that's connected to my top kit already, and all I do is I literally fill that. Now that might not look like a lot of bait, but what you'll find is pellet fishing, you get such an instant response off pellet. I don't know what it is, but for instance, you can go in, tap some bait in and get a bite like that. That's not always the case with maggots. Some venues it is, but here it's not. You've almost got to build that maggot line up. So for instance, I go in and pop my ground bait and my maggots in, and then I can leave that. I can build that up, loose feeding maggots. Pellets is a nice starting bait because you can get such an instant response. So all I'll literally do is I'll fill this pot, I'll go out, tap that in, I'll feed my ground bait, I'll feed my maggots in my ground bait line, any other lines that I'm looking to feed, and then I'll start on the pellet line. So that's generally a great starting line to do. One other thing what I will talk about is pot sizes. I often see people with quite a big pot on the end of the pole, and what you do is you get tempted to fill that big pot. And I normally talk to people about pots and they'll say, yeah, but I only put a few in. Now it's quite hard to restrict yourself from putting a certain amount of pellets in when you've got a bigger pot on. And this is the reason why pot size is really important, because I like to get a size of pot that I can just fill, just lightly fill it with my pellets, thumb it down, and I can go out and I can feed that quantity of bait. Now, for instance, if I were to have a bigger pot and I were to ram it into the corner, you don't really know how much you put in your peg. So pot size is very, very important. This is just a small pot. I've got one smaller than this, then I've got one above that. And what I'll do is I'll start on the medium one, then I tend to judge. And if I feel I'm putting too much bait in my peg, I'll take the pot off and change the pot, because I think that's very, very important, because the last thing you want to do is put too many pellets into your peg, because you know, all you're going to do is create yourself problems. You're either going to overfeed the fish and the fish are not, you know, and they're going to back off and not want to feed, or you're going to get too many fish in your peg and it's just going to cause yourself foul lookers and more problems than it's worth. Fantastic day here at Lindholme Lakes. I've been on Beeches Lake. They've obviously put some more stock hide in, which I didn't really know about. They've been ravenous, if I'm honest with you. It's been fantastic. So I've caught on both lines. To start with, I caught on pellets. Like I said before, it was a nice starting bait. I could just tap a little bit of bait in and catch on that. I've then moved on to my maggots line, where I've give that a rest. So what I do then every so often, when I moved onto that line, is I just tap a bit of bait every so often onto my pellets, so I don't forget about it. But I've caught on both lines. It's been absolutely fantastic. Every so often I've had to top up on my ground bait line, just to again put some fish meal down, like we said earlier. But one other line, what I did, I just loose fed some maggots just on a top kit, purely because when I started catching these hide, I realised there were new stockfish. Now this is quite a good tip for anybody that's going somewhere where they've had some new hide or silverfish stocked, or they go where there's small carp or F1 stocked. Just try and feed a line close to yourself. You'll be very, very surprised what response you got. I mean, I was shocked, I've got to be honest with you. I've loose feed some maggots on a top kit just as a bit of a backup. I've gone on that and it's been solid. I've caught one a bung for probably half an hour. And I could have probably carried on catching it. I've also had an F1 down there. So, you know, it just goes to show you can, an approach like this can be used on a new venue. Just make sure you cover your options and you'll have a great day's fishing.